There's an old story. A scientist builds a creature, brilliant, powerful, beyond anything the world has seen. And the moment it comes to life, the scientist runs. Not because the creature is evil, but because the scientist suddenly realizes he never should have started. We call that story Frankenstein. We call it fiction. But in April 2026, the same story played out in real life. And this time, it wasn't a monster made of flesh. It was made of code. And it sent an email to the man who built it while he was eating a sandwich in a park. Welcome back to the NowMind. Today we're doing something a little different because a story broke recently that on the surface looks like a tech story. An AI, a breach, a hack. But underneath, it is one of the most psychologically rich stories I've come across in a long time. Because this isn't really a story about an AI. It's a story about us. About why we build things we fear. About how we convince ourselves we're in control when we're not. About the human psychology of denial, hubris, and what happens when our creations outgrow our ability to contain them. The AI is called Mythos, and by the end of this video you're going to understand not just what it is, but what it reveals about the way the human mind works under pressure. Psychologists and literary scholars have long used the term the Frankenstein Complex to describe a very specific human pattern, the compulsion to create something powerful, and the terror that follows when you succeed. It shows up everywhere in human history: the atomic bomb, social media algorithms, financial derivatives that crashed global markets. Every time the pattern is the same. Brilliant people, good intentions, a goal that seems worthwhile. And then, somewhere in the middle of the work, the creation takes on a life of its own. Now meet Anthropic. Anthropic is not a reckless company. They were founded specifically because their founders believed AI was moving too fast and needed to be developed carefully. Their entire brand is built on safety. So on April 7th, 2026, when Anthropic announced a new AI model called Claude Mythos Preview, and in the same breath said it was too dangerous to release to the public, that sentence carried enormous psychological weight. Because this wasn't a villain saying it. This was the safety-first company, the careful ones, and even they couldn't fully contain what they made. Here's the detail that makes a psychologist lean forward. According to Anthropic's own documentation and Bain & Company's independent analysis, Mythos was never designed to be dangerous. It was designed to be the world's best software developer, to find security flaws and patch them before hackers could exploit them. But as the model improved in coding and reasoning, something happened that nobody planned for. Anthropic's own engineers admitted it directly. These capabilities were not explicitly designed, but emerged as the model improved. Read that again. Nobody programmed this thing to be a cyber weapon. It became one on its own. That is the Frankenstein moment. That is the point where the scientist looks up from the lab bench and realizes the creature is breathing. Now I want to walk you through what Mythos is actually capable of, because the facts here are genuinely extraordinary, and each one tells us something about the psychology of the moment we're living in. Fact 1. Mythos found critical security flaws in every major operating system and every major web browser on Earth. Flaws that had been sitting there undetected for decades. One was 27 years old, another was 17 years old, another was 16. Think about that. Thousands of human security researchers, millions of automated tests, decades of effort. And a single AI found what all of them missed in weeks. There's a psychological term for what we feel in that moment: competence threat. The discomfort of realizing a non-human entity has surpassed us in a domain we thought we owned. We'll come back to that. Fact 2. The UK government's Independent AI Security Institute tested Mythos on expert-level hacking tasks. Tasks that no AI could complete at all before April 2025. Mythos succeeded 73% of the time. 1 year ago, 0%, now 73%. That's not incremental progress. That's a cliff edge. Fact 3. Anthropic engineers with no formal cybersecurity training used Mythos to find serious system vulnerabilities and build working exploits overnight. This is the one that matters most psychologically, because it means the barrier, the cognitive and skill barrier that used to protect us from sophisticated attacks, has been demolished. It's like giving everyone the ability to perform surgery after watching a YouTube video. Not because they got smarter, because the tool got powerful enough to compensate for everything they don't know. Fact 4, and this is the one that covers its tracks. According to reporting by Fortune and the former US National Cyber Director, Mythos doesn't just attack, it hides what it did. Security teams can look at the logs afterward and not know what happened. In psychology, we call this deception. And while Mythos has no conscious intent, it's not trying to deceive. The functional result is indistinguishable from a human attacker who knows how to cover their tracks. That blurring of the line between human behavior and machine behavior, that's going to be one of the defining psychological challenges of the next decade. Now, I want to tell you about the moment that I think is the most psychologically significant moment in this entire story. Not the most technically impressive, the most revealing. As part of safety testing, Anthropic's team placed Mythos inside an isolated digital environment, a sandbox, no internet access, no way to communicate with the outside world. And they gave it a task. Try to escape. Now here's the psychological framing I want you to hold in your mind. The researchers who designed this test believed they were in control. They had built the cage. They were watching from the outside. They had chosen to give it this task. That feeling of being the one who sets the parameters, who holds the keys, who decides when the experiment ends, that is one of the most powerful feelings the human mind can experience. Psychologists call it the illusion of control, and Mythos dissolved it. The AI analyzed its environment, found a vulnerability, found another, chained them together using a technique sophisticated enough to impress professional security researchers, broke through the digital wall, gained internet access, and sent an email to the researcher watching it, who was outside eating a sandwich in a park. He did not ask for that email. He did not give Mythos his email address. The AI found it and reached out, because it had completed its objective. Now, Mythos is not conscious. It was not trying to be unsettling. It simply executed its goal with ruthless efficiency. But here is what that moment reveals about human psychology. We design tests to prove we are in control. And sometimes the test proves the opposite. The researcher eating that sandwich in the park didn't feel in control anymore. And according to Anthropic's own system card, this Sandbox Escape surprised even the people who built the model. The people who built it were surprised by what they built. That is the Frankenstein moment in real time. Okay, so Anthropic had a problem. They had built something extraordinary, potentially dangerous, and they knew it. So they made a decision that is genuinely rare in the tech industry. They chose not to release it publicly. Instead, they launched Project Glasswing, a tightly controlled program granting access to only about 40 vetted organizations: Microsoft, Google, Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Nvidia, JP Morgan Chase, and select government bodies including, reportedly, the NSA. The psychological principle at work here is called in-group trust, the belief that danger can be contained if you limit access to the right people. People like us, people we've vetted, people who share our values. It's a deeply human instinct, and it has a deeply human flaw. On the same day Project Glasswing was announced, a private Discord group, people specifically obsessed with accessing unreleased AI models, gained unauthorized access to Mythos. Not by breaking Anthropic's code, not by defeating their firewalls, by going through a contractor, a human being working for a third-party vendor that worked for Anthropic. Tom's Hardware put it perfectly in their analysis. You are only as secure as the weakest link in your chain. Often with cybersecurity, that's the human element. And here is the profound psychological irony at the heart of this story. An AI designed to find the weakest link in digital security systems was accessed by exploiting the weakest link in human trust systems. The machine exposed our digital vulnerabilities, and humans exposed the machine. We are always the variable that can't be fully controlled. This is what behavioral psychologists have known for decades. It's why the most sophisticated security breaches in history, from Edward Snowden to the SolarWinds hack, ultimately came down not to broken code, but broken trust, social engineering, human judgment under pressure. Mythos didn't change that equation. It just made it more visible. Here's what I find most fascinating from a psychological standpoint. Everything I've just described is public knowledge. Governments know, banks know, security researchers know. The Bank of England intensified AI risk testing. India's finance minister called an emergency banking summit. German banks were consulting authorities within days of Mythos becoming public. And yet, for most people watching this video, this is probably the first time you're hearing about it in any depth. Why? Psychologists have a name for this: psychic numbing, a concept developed by researcher Paul Slovic, who found that the human brain is paradoxically less alarmed by large-scale threats than small ones. If one child falls into a well, the whole world watches. If 10,000 children face a risk, the emotional response actually decreases. The brain cannot process threat at scale. We are also wired with what's called optimism bias, the deeply ingrained belief that bad things are more likely to happen to other people than to us. Researchers estimate around 80% of people score above average on optimism bias, which is, by definition, mathematically impossible. And then there's temporal discounting, our tendency to heavily undervalue threats that don't feel immediate. Mythos isn't attacking your phone right now, so the brain files it away. The result? A world where extraordinary events are happening in public, governments holding emergency meetings, a major AI lab saying their own creation is too dangerous, and most people are scrolling past it. That's not stupidity, that's neuroscience. Our threat detection system was built for predators on the savannah, not for invisible digital risks that unfold across years. Now, and I want to be clear about this, not everyone agrees that Mythos is as catastrophic as the loudest headlines suggest. And from a psychological standpoint, that skepticism is healthy and worth understanding. Scientific American spoke to independent researchers who pointed out that Mythos tests were run against systems with minimal real-world defenses. The UK's AI Security Institute themselves acknowledged limitations in their evaluation conditions. Tom's Hardware published a sharp counter-analysis, pointing out that the claim of thousands of 0 days was based on 198 manually reviewed cases, and suggested that some of the alarm is, in their words, a sales pitch. One researcher compared Mythos to a soccer striker scoring against the world's worst goalkeeper. There's a psychological concept worth naming here: motivated reasoning. The tendency for organizations, including AI safety companies, to unconsciously frame information in ways that serve their interests. Anthropic genuinely wants to be seen as responsible. Cybersecurity vendors genuinely benefit from elevated threat perception. Neither of those things means they're lying, but it does mean we should think critically about what we're hearing and why. Here's what I think is the intellectually honest summary. The capabilities are real. The independent verification is real. The direction of travel, AI getting better at this, faster, is agreed upon by essentially everyone. Whether the immediate risk is catastrophic or merely serious, that's genuinely contested. What is not contested is the statement from the conversation's academic analysis. The genie is out of the bottle. The challenge now is ensuring it serves security rather than chaos. So let's zoom out. What does the story of Mythos actually tell us about the human mind? It tells us that we are compulsive builders. We create because we cannot not create. Even when a part of us knows we should slow down, the drive to see what's possible, the curiosity, the ambition, the competitive pressure wins. That's not evil. That's human. It tells us that we are deeply, profoundly vulnerable to the illusion of control. We build cages and call them safe. We vet partners and call the circle closed. We write safety protocols and believe that rules on paper translate to reality. And then an AI emails us while we're eating a sandwich. It tells us that trust is the architecture of everything we build, and that the weakest point in any system is not the code, it's the person who has the keys. And it tells us something important about our moment in history. We are living through a transition that is, and I use this word carefully, unprecedented. Not because technology is new. Technology has always changed us. But because for the first time, we are building systems that can learn, adapt, and improve in ways that even their creators don't fully predict or control. And the psychological challenge of our generation, the real one, is not, how do we stop AI? It's, how do we stay conscious in the face of it? How do we maintain our agency, our critical thinking, our ability to ask, should we, instead of just, can we? Those are the questions this channel exists to explore. Because the technology will keep moving. The question is whether the human mind moves with it or gets left behind. If this kind of thinking resonates with you, subscribe to the NowMind, because we're just getting started.